Are you ready for some smart, plain talk on politics, Israel, and the law? It's the Andrew Parker Show. Let's roll. Welcome to another episode of the Andrew Parker Show. This is episode 416. Wowza, indeed. You know, you can follow us first by going to our website, which you see on your screen, theandrewparkershow.com. Go to our website, follow us, subscribe, like the show, sign up for emails. We do email blasts. You will not miss an episode when it drops. If you do so, fill out the contact form if you have a message for me or an idea for a show topic. Always open to ideas, indeed. You can text message me as well. Take a look, 952-522-2818. Send a text. Let's start a conversation. Or ideas, or say, that was a dumbass comment you made in episode 413. Let us know. Happy to hear from you. You can always listen on your favorite podcast platform to the Andrew Parker Show. We're across the board. All of them: Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Castro, this, that, the other. Enjoy us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, of course. And again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yes, indeed. We have a YouTube channel. Love to have you watch and listen at the same time. And however you like to watch, listen, or engage, you can connect with the Andrew Parker Show. Again, visit our website and subscribe and connect with us on social media. Again, we've been operating, talking politics, Israel, and the law on each episode for nearly 9 years, well over 400 episodes now. As you heard, this is episode 416. And today, I'd like to talk with you all about what's happening in Gaza, because you can't get the real story on mainstream media, for sure. It is slanted to a narrative that is false, some just blatant misstatements, fake news, false statements. Others just shaded to give an inaccurate impression. Listen, it's a war zone, and it's one of the most difficult war zones in history. It is densely populated, urban area, which, more than that, has hundreds of miles of tunnels that were dug underneath it as a fortress that the Palestinians knew would be nearly impossible to counter, nearly impossible to defeat or to destroy. And if the Israelis attempted to do so, in order to protect the very existence of the state of Israel, in order to protect the people of Israel from what happened in the atrocities of October 7th, that the world would side against Israel. Clearly, Israel is the victim of October 7th and what happened. Their country was attacked. Their citizens were murdered in some of the worst most heinous ways. Certainly they were the victim here, and any attempt to suggest otherwise should be completely set aside. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict certainly has a history, and there are certainly different views, some might say nuances, regarding it. I don't believe that it is, one party says one, the other party says something different. There's probably truth on both sides, and the truth lands somewhere in the middle. No, that's not the case. Just because there are two stories, if one is true and the other is blatantly false, then the truth doesn't land somewhere in the middle. So you have to consider that that is a possibility in different analyses. But most in the West simply throw up their hands and say, I must land somewhere in the middle. They're both right and they're both wrong. Well, we're not going to get into the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict today. We can certainly talk about that. Palestine and Jews of Palestine were in the land that is known as Palestine, that name being taken or started with the Romans, and the Jews were certainly there then, and they were attacked and driven out by the Romans. But that's when the name existed. But the people, the Jewish people, were there well before, in that same land, the land of Israel, thousands of years ago, and indeed before Islam even existed, and have consistently been there since. Thus, the Jews are the indigenous people of that land. Now, that doesn't wipe out the fact that Arab Muslims lived in that land as well later on. And both lived in that land, certainly the Jews did, continuously. But this is not a fight over land. Remember, before 1948, before Israel was reestablished as the Jewish homeland, attacks against Jews by the Muslims living in the area were frequent. Some of them enormous slaughters, like in Hebron in 1929. And that was not over a fight about land. It was, as is existing today, a call to destroy the Jews, to push them into the sea, to rid the area of Jews, just like virtually every Muslim Arab country has done, rid their country of Jews. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Jews were forced out of Arab countries, of Muslim Arab countries. Hundreds of thousands. Most ended up in the reestablished state of Israel. So, again, it's really not about land. The Palestinians were in space that they're currently in large part, after the reestablishment of the State of Israel and before 1967. And during those 19 years, from 48 to 67, Jordan controlled the land. And it was not a big hue and cry demanding a state for the Palestinian people at that time against the Jordanians who controlled much of the land and the Egyptians who controlled some of it as well, including Gaza. No, it was only when the 1967 war occurred and Israel, to protect its borders, expanded. After that war, brought on by the Arabs who were going to destroy entirely the state of Israel that had just been reestablished those 19 years earlier. It was only after that the hue and cry for a Palestinian, for land to be taken from the Jews was the big narrative. So when we turn to Gaza and what happened in Gaza, we cannot forget the history of it. And I want to recommend to you an article that was written last month by Jeff Jacoby, the Boston Globe opinion columnist, which is one of the best articles I have read in recent times. It covers fundamentals of what is happening in Gaza. And it comes right on the heels of Bibi Netanyahu's determination with his war cabinet to eventually take over the entire Gaza territory through a military operation in Gaza City, which continues to have a very active Hamas bastion. Yes, that remains in Gaza City. Netanyahu said this about the plan that is currently underway. He says, "Our plan is not to occupy or annex Gaza. Our goal is to destroy Hamas and get our hostages back, and then hand over Gaza to a transitory government. If Hamas concedes and lays down their arms and frees hostages, the war will be over tomorrow." Of course, we've known that for a long time, but Hamas doesn't want to do that. They would rather die than do that. They would rather have their citizens, for sure, die than do that. In fact, one of their primary tools or weapons is the death of their citizens, who they have never really cared about, who they are taking humanitarian aid from presently to line their pockets with the money from the sale of that and the black market, and to continue to fund their militant operations. But the death of civilians of Hamas, you need to understand, if you don't already, and I think most of you do, is a tactic, a strategy of Hamas. And in fact, it's one that they support, they herald, and they cheer on. The more deaths of Palestinians, the more their fight against Israel is buttressed, is assisted, is helped. And of course, unfortunately, the fools in Western governments provide cover for that, in fact, provide support for that. In fact, are the useful idiots who bring about that policy. Without Western Europe responding like lapdogs to what Hamas is doing, that is, creating a humanitarian crisis, creating death upon death to the extent they can with human shields, their own civilians, making sure that the humanitarian aid does not get to the people in Gaza. The Western governments just love it, and they eat it up, and they don't have a clue what they're doing. When I say they eat it up, I mean they say, "Oh, it's humanitarian aid, and Israel has to be stopped." And look at the brutality of the Israelis, and of course, if Israel just stopped the war, forget about the fact that, well, Hamas would survive and then retool, and then another October 7th would happen again, because, as they say, we're going to do this again and again and again and again. Not if you're destroyed and denazified. People thought, oh, you know, it's an ideology. You can't destroy an ideology. You can kill all the Hamas militants in the area. It'll pop up somewhere else, etc. Maybe so, but you could certainly have said that about Nazi Germany. And look at the country of Germany now. The Nazis have not come back there at all. There was a denazification. The ideology, of course, it exists in pockets around the world, but in large, the ideology gone. Some of its tactics were picked up by Hamas and used on October 7th, for sure. The ideology, the denazification following World War II. Well, it can happen here, and we can learn something from it. But what has occurred in Gaza did not occur in a vacuum, did not occur without there being history that brought together a confluence of activity that allowed for what occurred on October 7th and the current war in Gaza, which is now on our TVs every night. It just didn't pop up. So the Jacoby article, again, it's a key article. It's in his column called "Arguable" with Jeff Jacoby. It's entitled "When Israel Left Gaza, Everything Got Worse." So he writes, there is no way to know yet how all of this will turn out, but as Israel prepares to push still deeper into Gaza, in what may be the cataclysmic final phase of its war to eliminate Hamas, it is worth looking back to reflect on another fateful, anguish-filled Israeli decision in Gaza, one that began the descent into the nightmare the Jewish state now faces. So what was it that began the descent, that allowed for all of this suffering to occur? He writes, it was exactly 20 years ago this week, August 15, 2005, that the Israeli government, led by then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, destroyed 21 Jewish communities in the Gaza Strip. Now, many of you know that. You remember it, or you have studied it, and you're aware that 21 Jewish communities were destroyed by their own government, by the Israeli government, not in response to a particular demand and not in exchange for a quid pro quo, receiving nothing in return. These 21 Jewish communities were destroyed, and there was an eviction of 9,000 Israelis that occurred that week in August 20 years ago. Also occurring, the demolition of the homes where some of them had lived for decades. They were encouraged to go there and to build these communities in Gaza. Living Jew, non-Jew, Jew, Christian, Jew, not so much Christian, but Muslim, in the same area, which exists in Israel. It doesn't exist in the Muslim Arab countries. Jews are not welcome. They're kicked out. In Israel, Muslims, Arabs, have rights if they are Israeli citizens. All the rights of other Israeli citizens. All the rights of other Israeli citizens. Voting rights. In fact, there are many members of the Knesset who are Muslim Arabs. And more than that, there are sitting Supreme Court justices in the state of Israel. Building permits, massive permitting, more permitting in Arab areas for additional building than in Jewish areas for much of the last couple of decades. So back to Gaza, this happened 20 years ago. They're forcefully removed people from their homes by their own government, and complete denuding of the Jews from Gaza, unilaterally surrendered it over to the Palestinian Authority. Israel relinquished the territory it had occupied in the 1967 Six-Day War without requiring anything in return. Sharon labeled the operation disengagement, a term meant to suggest that by handing Gaza to the Palestinians, Israel could finally sever its ties to that troubled territory and its population. Separate. We'll be on one side. The Palestinians will be on the other side. We will have no control or authority over that area. They can make with it what they wish. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Are you a business owner? Are you losing sleep because you feel your partner isn't carrying their weight, or because you no longer share the same vision or values? Are you no longer comfortable going into your own office? Are you walking on eggshells in the company you built? This is Chris Daniels, founding partner of Parker Daniels Keyboard LLC, a premier litigation law firm headquartered in downtown Minneapolis. For more than 30 years, I've specialized in business litigation and have helped hundreds of business owners resolve troubling business disputes. As a former certified public accountant, I get to the heart of the dispute, including financial issues. Business divorce can be messy, time-consuming, and costly, but doing nothing can cost you a lot more. Not just money, but emotionally, physically, and in your personal life. If you and your business partner no longer see eye to eye, and you're eager to take a proactive approach and make a change, please call me at 612-355-4100 and schedule a consultation. Or visit our website at www.parkerdk.com.
Looking to reduce your tax liability and grow your portfolio? Consider Texas-based Texacoma Resources. They have been delivering results for over 40 years in energy investments. Investors may benefit with strategic advantages like depreciation, depletion, and drilling, but should consult their tax advisors for their specific situation. In addition, those who invest in August will receive a 5% investment bonus. Don't wait. Call True North Investment at 612-968-3442 to learn more. That's True North Investment, 612-968-3442. Texacoma Energy that works for you. In fact, Ehud Olmert, who was also involved in this Sharon decision, he was the deputy prime minister at the time, said, "It will be good for us and will be good for the Palestinians. It will bring more security, greater safety, much more prosperity, and a lot of joy for all the people that live in the Middle East." A new morning of great hope will emerge, he says. He was sure that with the end of Israel's, quote, occupation, the Middle East will indeed become what it was destined to be from the outset, a paradise for all the world. That might have been wishful thinking. Yeah, I think so. He finishes his comments with, well, actually, it was an Israeli journalist who was writing about this, who said, "They'll run their lives the way they see fit, and we won't have to be involved." And they did. Right off, just within the first few several months, Palestinian people ran their lives by electing Hamas as the governing body. And Hamas controlled with an iron fist everything that went on, and they spent the next 20 years building 300 miles of tunnels, receiving billions of dollars from the West, and building a murderous war machine, terrorist regime, built a terrorist machine. Almost immediately, they started firing rockets into Israel. And it continued, not every single day, but repeatedly over time. How long would any country of the West stand by while a neighbor that you had just removed all of your people from, uprooting them and their lives and what they had built, all of their memories of their homes destroyed? And by the way, in addition to giving this over to Gaza, the Israelis gave over some 3,000 greenhouses, high-tech greenhouses, not some rickety old, no, high-tech. And within the first few months, they were all destroyed. All of the technology destroyed by the Palestinians. So the thought was, by heading out of Gaza, Israel would be walking into peace, peace with its Palestinian neighbor. After all, the West was calling Israel the obstacle to peace. Israel leaves, rockets immediately start, Hamas is elected, and Israel had shown itself to walking off a cliff, but not into peace. You see, as Jacoby writes, the unilateral withdrawal from Gaza was not interpreted by Israel's enemies as an act of magnanimity or pragmatism. It was interpreted as a surrender. Rather than a historic demonstration of Israel's desire for peace, the evacuation of those 21 communities and the departure of every Israeli soldier from Gaza were seen by the Palestinian Authority as proof that violence pays. This is what happens. And it's happened this way throughout history. And anyone who says otherwise is ignoring history. That when you take such action to placate and reward heinous actions, those actions will be repeated again and again and again. When you take action to negotiate with terrorists who have taken hostages, to reward them with 1,000 prisoners to one hostage, you can bet that more and more hostages will be taken. You can bet that the terrorists will view this as victory and the way to get their way. If Israel were to allow Hamas to survive and get back thousands of Palestinians with blood on their hands, murderers, rapists, those that have engaged in heinous acts, these are the terrorists that are being asked to be released by Hamas in exchange. Every time that happens, and it's hard not to do it, no doubt. And, the hue and cry, we do not negotiate with terrorists. It's set aside in the end. And this is why terrorism has continued. It has not been destroyed. It is fought there's a fight in order to fight another day. This is what happened with Hezbollah in the north back in, 06? The UN, the Western countries demanded Israel to stop, discontinue its bombardment to destroy Hezbollah that had 100,000 rockets pointed at Israel. So Hezbollah was allowed to survive. They gained a stronger foothold in Lebanon. They took over the government of Lebanon. They created Lebanon from what it was into a terror state. And they multiplied the number of rockets that they had. Now, that is more recently been debilitated by Israel's attacks, its intelligence. But this is a lesson, and it occurs time and time again. So when Ariel Sharon and Ehud Olmert decided to uproot the Jewish residents of Gaza, it was viewed by Hamas, by the Palestinians, as proof that violence pays. The IDF went into Gaza not to fight the Palestinians, but to fight the Jews and to drag them out. It was to be a sign of goodwill and fraternity. But as I said, goodwill and fraternity was not reciprocated. In fact, the statement made by the Hamas chief, who is now dead, Mohammed Daif, "Today you leave Gaza in humiliation," he said, boasting that he and his people had made Gaza hell for Israel and vowing, "Tomorrow, with Allah's help, all of Palestine will be hell for you." And with not an Israeli soldier anywhere in Gaza, not a Jew anywhere in Gaza, the Palestinians had land that they could create what they wished. Instead, they elected Hamas and began firing rockets immediately, causing Israel to need to prevent armaments from going to Gaza. You need to understand, Gaza is right across the street from Jewish communities in Israel, Israel proper. Communities, some of which have been there for hundreds of years, always viewed as Israel proper since 1948, the reestablishment. But Jewish communities that have been there much, much, much longer. And I've been to kibbutzim along that Israeli border with Gaza, where you literally can stand on a mound of dirt and look out pretty much across a street right into Gaza. You know, maybe it's not even a quarter mile. So this is the geography of the area. So the Palestinians had this opportunity, and you have to look at those first few days and wonder, is this a people that wants peace? Is this a people that wants a state to live side by side in peace with the Jews in Israel? Well, they keep saying that's not what they want. That's not what their documents, their creation documents say. They say it's a total obliteration of the state of Israel and of the Jews. With the Israelis out, Palestinians surged into the abandoned settlements. I'm reading from Jacoby's article. And immediately burned down the empty synagogues that were there. They were emptied out when the evacuation by the IDF of all Jews in Gaza occurred. Within days, the sophisticated greenhouses were completely trashed, looted, stripped of irrigation hoses, water pumps, plastic sheeting. And Qassam rockets began flying over the border into nearby Israeli communities. This was the beginning of a terrorist torrent, he writes. And then Hamas handily defeated Fatah, the main faction of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority. And by 2007, Hamas had seized complete control in Gaza and imposed an Islamist reign of terror. Anyone who didn't fall in line was killed. Hamas then turned Gaza into a forward base for the Islamic Republic of Iran and began importing Iranian rockets. And over the last many years, created this machine of death that I talked about. Now, there is no question that many Gazan residents had reservations ultimately that they had voted for Hamas. And they ultimately, many of them may well have wanted Hamas out. But Hamas, as I say, governed with an iron fist. Year upon year, decade upon decade, at least for those 20 years, Israel tried to ignore the number of rockets that were fired over continually. And successive Israeli governments accepted the status quo, convinced that the alternative, reoccupying Gaza and destroying the Hamas regime, was too costly to contemplate. Well, boy, don't they have a different view today as to what is costly and what isn't. The prevailing view, or the conception, is that Hamas contended, as they contended with governing the Gaza Strip, they would gradually grow more malleable, tractable. Israeli policymakers from Netanyahu on down believed that economic gains would induce Hamas to moderate its jihadist mission. That did not happen. And I would suggest it will never happen unless Hamas is destroyed. And frankly, I don't know if it can happen with the Palestinian Authority either. And to believe that it will, well, we do that at our own peril, for sure. Then came October 7th. We all know what happened. I'm not going to get into that on this show, this episode. It was horrific. And since, there have been horrors as well, horrors of war. Israel can no longer have borders with these terrorists on them, with this hate filled. Again, at any moment, Hamas could end the war, but it does not want to. It does not meet its goals. And it never will. As Jacoby writes, Hamas's purpose is not just to wound Israel's reputation, it is to delegitimize Jews as moral actors altogether. And boy, is he ever, or is Hamas ever does it ever have an audience better? It couldn't. The West are the lapdogs. They are the useful idiots. Australia, France, Canada, the UK. It's unbelievable, playing right into the continuation of these Nazi-like terrorist haters and making them believe, why should we do a deal with Israel? We are going to destroy them ultimately. Look at our friends over here in the West. They're buying what we're putting down. They're picking up what we're putting down. Lock, stock, and barrel. The delegitimization of the Jew is working. They want to strip the Jewish state of the right to defend itself and to normalize the corrosive idea that Israel's very existence is a provocation. It must be destroyed. It must be excised from the Middle East. Jacoby goes on to say, its defamations embolden Israel's enemies, sap the resolve of its friends, and distort the moral lens through which the world views the conflict. And the West propagates it. supports it. The Democratic Party does. Just as Israel's pre-October 7th conception ideas blinded it to the scale of the physical threat from Gaza, too many in the democratic world are blind to the scale of the strategic threat in the information battle. People are being raised on falsehoods, blatant falsehoods, and many in the West are too scared to bring it up, to call falsehoods actual falsehoods. Illusions are dangerous, and the price of indulging them is paid in blood. History shows, according to Jacoby again, that cataclysmic defeat can be the gateway to renewal. After World War II, as I talked about earlier, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan were crushed into unconditional surrender. We've talked about unconditional surrender and the importance of it, the opposite of negotiating with terrorists. The opposite of it, unconditional surrender. Deterrence theory. The Germans, the Japanese, their regimes were dismantled, their ideologies discredited, and their societies rebuilt on democratic foundations. We're not talking about regime building. We're talking about destroying a heinous ideology. Jacoby writes, such a rebirth is devoutly to be wished for the Palestinians, but it will never be possible until Hamas and the equally malign Palestinian Authority, yes, Mahmoud Abbas, that everyone says, oh, they're moderates, they're fine. No, on the West Bank, they are building this same type of hate, and they've been doing it for decades, more than 20 years. 40 years, we're talking more than that. Back to when Yasser Arafat controlled the education system of the young Palestinian minds. Until Hamas and equally malign Palestinian Authority are so utterly defeated that their war to destroy Israel is ended permanently, only when Gaza is freed from leaders who glorify murder and annihilation can it begin to heal. Only when there are Palestinian leaders who renounce the dream of eliminating the Jewish state can they begin to build a decent one of their own. And only when Israel prevails completely, militarily, morally, and politically, will both peoples have a chance to live side by side in the secure and mutual beneficial peace that has eluded them for so long. Jeff Jacoby's words. Prescient, I dare say accurate, based on history and a large foundation mountain of examples. Let's not make the same mistake that has been made in Israel for far too long. And let's turn the Western governments back into moral actors. Not with a lot of platitudes and acting like, oh, we're the ones who are against war and for peace. Sometimes to get to peace, there must be war. War to the point of unconditional surrender. Oh, easy for you to say, you're sitting here in the United States. No. No part of that is easy to say. But if it brings peace, it is worthy. Thank you very much for joining us on the Victory Hour, the Andrew Parker Show, one time the Victory Hour. I hope when you go online to pull down podcasts of the past, whether it be when Ben Shapiro joined us on the show or the journalist Selena Zito, who many of you have read, or Rudy Giuliani, or Alan Dershowitz, or many of the Congress people or the consul generals from the state of Israel to the United States joining us on the show. When you go back to take a look at those mini episodes, you will consider what I hope is relative consistency that we bring to the issues of the day. It matter not whether it's an idea or a policy from the blue team or from the red team. It's just one that on its merits, the analysis reflects clearly, hopefully, the direction that should be taken. And if it is not clear, that should be made clear. Thank you again. I will put up on the screen 952-522-2818. And you can text us at that number. Go to theandrewparkershow.com for all of that information, as well as signing up with us and providing your email address. There are many different ways to connect. Next episode, I hope to get to some, what do we call it? Viewer-listener mail. And we have been getting some in, so that will be interesting for you as well. Thank you again. Until the next episode, be kind to your neighbor. For more Smart Plain Talk, go to theandrewparkershow.com. Learn about all of your listening and viewing options. And remember, all the great things are simple, and many can be expressed in a single word: freedom, justice, honor, duty, mercy, hope. This episode of The Andrew Parker Show is sponsored by Parker Daniels Keyboard and True North Private Investments. Mark Twain once quipped, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. When you are lied about and it spreads, the resulting mayhem and destruction can be, and often is, disastrous." Hi, this is Andrew Parker, co-founder of the Parker Daniels Keyboard Law Firm. I recently handled a high-profile defamation lawsuit on behalf of a luxury home real estate agent whose business was decimated by falsehoods spread about him. After nearly 2 years of litigation and 2 weeks of trial, the jury came back with a verdict of more than $2 million for our client. Parker Daniels Keyboard. We litigate cases, we try cases, and we win cases. With a record of excellence in achieving extraordinary results, Parker Daniels Keyboard lawyers have consistently won huge verdicts for its clients in the areas of defamation, civil rights violations, regulatory battles, and intellectual property theft. For wise counsel and winning results, contact us at Parker Daniels Keyboard, premier law firm in downtown Minneapolis. Looking to reduce your tax liability and grow your portfolio? Consider Texas-based Texacoma Resources. They have been delivering results for over 40 years in energy investments. Investors may benefit with strategic advantages like depreciation, depletion, and drilling, but should consult their tax advisors for their specific situation. In addition, those who invest in August will receive a 5% investment bonus. Don't wait. Call True North Investment at 612-968-3442 to learn more. That's True North Investment, 612-968-3442. Texacoma Energy that works for you.